Hello, everyone. I hope you guys can hear me. Haven't changed anything in the mic settings from yesterday, so you guys should be able to hear me just fine. But anyways, I'm going to get started, and we're just going to continue off where we left yesterday on this Q&A. So for those of you who are tuning in or watching this later, just so that way you guys know what's going on. So I'm answering Q&A questions that I started 2 years ago. When I was about to pass 10,000 subscribers, I announced a Q&A, and in that, I took way too long in responding. So I am now doing them as a live stream on my second channel, my UK channel, just so that way I can get those answers to you guys who asked them, since it's been so long. And then my plan is to take this live stream and eventually splice it up and cleanly edit it, and then publish it on my normal channel. So that's why it's here on this second channel. So for today, we're just going to be continuing on from yesterday's questions. We're going to be going through the television series. So we're going to be talking about different things from the model era to CGI, anything in between. The only thing we're not going to really be talking about is Big World, Big Adventures, the latest stuff. That's going to be a whole other section that we'll cover another day. There'll be certain things, certain aspects of it that'll probably come up throughout this section. But yeah, so yeah, if you guys are watching this live, feel free to comment, to ask questions and things. I'll try and check the live chat every once in a while to get feedback on what's going on. Maybe ask you guys to see what you guys like. But yeah, so wow, it looks like we already have a bunch of people in the chat. Cool. I didn't realize that we were going to get that many people that fast. Great to see some familiar faces in there. But anyways, I'm going to just jump right in and get started with it. Okay, so the Mini Arsdale 22 asked, if there were 5 engines leaving Sodor and 5 coming back, who would leave and who would return? Oh, this is a really hard question. I don't know what I would do. 5 engines leaving. I'd probably pick 5 engines from like the Miller era that I don't like. Obviously, like the Misty Island Locos, and who else would I pick? Who's some characters I don't like? Hugo's pretty boring. I think I'd get rid of him. Porter's kind of boring too. I don't really see the purpose with him. I mean, obviously, if anything big world related, I'd get rid of Mia and Rebecca. 5 coming back. I'd love to see Stepney, Boko, Duke. I mean, obviously the main ones everyone talks about that they'd love to see return. Yeah, I think that would be those would be the ones that I would pick. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I hope that's a satisfactory answer. I'm not quite sure which other ones I would bring back. I don't know if that includes like Railway Series characters or whatnot, but those I would at least want those 3 to come back. Not sure about the other ones. I think this question was asked back before season 20 finished airing, so there was a lot more. I mean, Bulgy and Terrence could be included. I guess George and Caroline, I'd like to see them return as well. So those would be the ones I'd pick. All right. TTNP Studios asked, if you could be any character on Sodor, who would you be and why? Okay, so the reason why you've noticed probably through yesterday's Q&A and then today's that as I've I've picked certain images and pictures to go along with each question. And the reason why I chose this question is because I think if I could be any character on Sodor, not a steam engine or like an engine or a vehicle, like if I was actually a human, I think the role I would want to be is someone like Sir Topham Hatt's assistants. Maybe not like being the ones that are like there with him all the time, that are like just doing everything he asks and like catering to his every little need and whatnot. I think I would like to be someone who's like has not an authority, but someone who gets to help out in the railway, but not just be stuck to one particular place. And I think being like an assistant to Sir Topham Hatt, going around and like working with the engines, making sure that the railway's running, and basically acting on behalf of Sir Topham Hatt in various locations, obviously, because he can't be everywhere. I think that would be the role I'd want to be. So, like, if I could be one of those 2 guys that were behind Sir Topham Hatt helping him, making sure the railway functions, and being able to go to a variety of locations on Sodor, see a variety of characters, work with a lot of different people. I think that would be what I would get the most joy out of being on Sodor. So that'd be the role I would want to take on. So yeah. Toby77C, Ryan Train Track, the Blue Pony asked, if you had to live on Sodor, where would you live? And I purposely picked the picture from Mind That Bike of that little cottage on the coastal track because I think if I could live anywhere on Sodor, it'd probably be there because I think that would be um, a fun place to be. Like they don't, this line isn't specified if it's necessarily Thomas's branch line or if it's maybe it's on Duck's branch line or on the main line. I mean, you see different characters going through it throughout the season and whatnot, and so I think it'd be fun to be somewhere like that where you get a variety of engines coming through. I mean, it wasn't really decided who like which line that was that runs by, and so I think it would be fun to live there. Obviously, the ocean and I mean the Sodor coastlines are beautiful, so I think that would be a beautiful place to live. Get to enjoy the ocean, get to enjoy the beach, and be able to see all the engines and whatnot. Plus, I mean, Tom Tipper gets to deliver your mail, so I mean, there are no complaints there. So that's probably where I would live. Yeah. All right. Thomas Remakes asked, if you were to visit Sodor, what 3 places would you visit? 3 people would you meet, and 3 engines to meet? Again, like I said yesterday in my in the Q&A, that I have a tough time picking favorites. So picking 3 is easier for me than picking 1, but I still have a hard time just picking 3. So let's see. 3 places. I think I definitely want to visit Knapford. There's a lot of busyness to go on. Then I think I'd love to go to like the lakeside, like the narrow gauge lakeside. You know, you see Tom Tipper driving around, or you see like some of the faraway narrow gauge shots. I think it just looks like a really cool vacation destination. Like there's a lot of shops, a lot of things going on, and you get to see a lot of different engines. So I definitely want to go there. A 3rd place. Ooh, I don't even know. Um, Maybe take a trip up to the village in the mountains in the 3rd season, where like the Ulfstead village and whatnot, past like the waterfall and all those beautiful sights. I think those would probably be the 3 places. 3 people, obviously, I'd want to meet Sir Topham Hatt. Probably. Oh, who else would I want to meet? Maybe Tom Tipper, Mrs. Kindly, the vicar. Probably just different crew members on Sodor. That they would probably be the most interesting to talk to. And then 3 engines. I would probably want to chat with Thomas, Gordon. And I don't know who I would pick for a 3rd one, but at least like I know for sure I'd want to talk to those 2. So, yeah, I would definitely want to at least talk to those 2. I'm not sure who else I would meet. Maybe James. I don't know. Picking the engines, I think, would be the hardest one to decide. Okay, Merritt Train Boy, Jet the Hawk 1994, Gordon Fan, and Playrail Guy 01 asked, least favorite episode. Well, obviously, I'd have to pick something from the Miller era during the terrible times that we had then. Like to pick one episode, I mean, Up and Away was pretty bad. I think Wonky Whistle was another one that was like really bad. Like what I can't remember the name of the episode where Thomas's firebox was on fire and Flynn had to put it out. I think that was it Race to the Rescue or something like that. One was also like really bad. One of those all-time lows of the series. But yeah, probably one of those. I don't know which one exactly I would pick as my total or the absolute least favorite episode. Um, uh, I'm not sure if there's questions in further going forward if there's ones about least favorite episodes in the classic series or least favorite CGI, but I think there might be, so I'll save those for then. Gabriel Morio, I think I said that right. Again, I apologize if I butcher people's names. If I messed up your name somehow, please send me like a direct message on Twitter or something. Let me know so that way I can correct it in case you ask other questions in the future, so that way I'm not continually butchering your name, because I would feel bad repeatedly doing that. So let's see. Out of all Well, so Gabriel Morio asked, out of all the classic series locations that have not been rendered in CGI yet, which ones would you like to see return next? I would specifically love to see Tidmouth Station come back. The main reason behind that is because I think, especially lately, they've been really overusing Knapford as a set in CGI. And I mean, it's a good set, especially with that new rail yard that they added and all the different tracks and directions that they can go. I think that they did a lot of good stuff with that, so that way they can do a lot of variety and engines moving around and different things, and it makes things fun. But like Knapford is just overused all the time, and I think it gets to be a little too much in the fact that Sodor doesn't seem quite that big when all the major things or all the like a lot of the discussions and talking points are taking place at Knapford consistently. And so I think that having Tidmouth come back would be perfect because it has such a wide variety of things in the set. I think the set was originally designed in season 2 to kind of be like a makeshift to put kind of everything like a one set that can kind of have a variety of things. I mean, it's got the station itself, it's got a turntable, it's got Farquhar sheds, it's got the coal hoppers. It's also got the station master's house. It has kind of that entryway with lots of tracks, kind of like a yard area. And so there's like a wide variety inside that set. And I think that, well, also you had like the road area where vehicles can come. That's where Bulgy and Duck started their race and whatnot. And so I think that there's a lot of potential with that set, and I think that would be a good way to kind of mix things up and make the island feel a little bit bigger, so that way not everything's taking place at Knapford, but it can still cover like all the main reasons why they use Knapford in the series. So I think that that would be probably the one set I would really love to see them bring back. Other sets that I think would be great would be the canal track from the 3rd season. I really like that one. I'd love to see that. Like I call it the triple stack bridge. I think it's called the 3-way road on the wiki, but it's basically that viaduct and that one bridge, and the tracks go 3 different ways, and it kind of created some cool shots in the 3rd season in the latter half of the 3rd season, where they were able to have multiple engines kind of running all over it and get like a wide variety of characters moving around in the shot. I think, what other ones would I really like? The Sodor Castle from season 2. I think that would be another one I'd like to see return. I think no, I liked classic Marin Station. Lower Sudbury, I think that would be another great station to bring back, especially because it has that mini yard in the 3rd season, anyways. And so I think that they could do some stuff with that. Plus, it'd be fun to see more of Edward's branch line and whatnot. So yeah, I think those would be the main sets I would like to see return in CGI. But I don't know if we're gonna ever see those likely, because it just seems like they're focusing now on all the sets around the world and whatnot. So yeah. Okay, next question. The Big Station Studios and Farquhar Engine asked, personal thoughts on the whole Henry Old Shape thing and the adventure begins. So I think I kind of declared my stance on it when I used a custom Old Shape Henry in my remake of the adventure begins. And although people were very quick to notice that not every scene had that Old Shape Henry, and the reason why is because I filmed the the Adventure Begins remake using footage from back in 2016 all the way until I mean I was editing it right until before the release, and so I wasn't able to start including stuff with Old Shape Henry until German Blue Sodor had sent me the custom that he had made for me, which wasn't until I think it was like early spring 2017. So like I didn't go back and refilm the scenes that had New Shape Henry, just because I didn't. It didn't seem worth. It wasn't as big of a deal as like James being red or black, and so I kept those certain scenes that had New Shape Henry as that, and then all the new scenes that I was filming, I just used Old Shape Henry. Except I think I actually made the mistake in the Henry and Thomas's scene at Tidmouth Sheds in the rain. I think I accidentally used New Shape Henry just because I was in a crunch at that point. I'm trying to finish everything, and so I think I just grabbed New Shape Henry without thinking, filmed the scene, and then I think it was like a couple weeks later I was looking at the footage and I was like, oh crap, we shouldn't have done that. But It's fine. It worked out. I think people understood what I was trying to get across. It's kind of just a fun little Easter egg, little goof that it goes back and forth between them. I really wish that they would have created classic Henry's old shape for the Adventure Begins. I think it would have been nice also having Tidma Sheds have 6 berths, but considering that the special was kind of it was a smaller special. It was 45 minutes. It sounded like it was like a Walmart exclusive. That was what it was commissioned to be. So it didn't quite have the budget of a normal full length special. I think that they did a great job considering. So yeah, I think if it had been maybe an hour long special and they could have devoted more resources, then definitely it would have been awesome if they would have done that. But it's not the end of the world. One thing though, side note with The Adventure Begins that I was just thinking the other day, how fun would it have been if for Judy and Jerome in the breakdown train, that orange coach that they have with them, what if they had given that a face and that was another character? And so like you have like Judy and Jerome kind of acting like an older married couple, and then you have the coach, which is smaller, that's like their kid that like is constantly like, oh, stop nagging, like stop going on about this, like gosh, you're embarrassing me. Like I think that would have been kind of like a funny addition, but it's yeah, it's kind of weird that like the coach doesn't have a face, but both of them do. But oh well, I mean, it's not a big deal. It just kind of would have been like a funny little addition I was thinking about. All right, Nathan reviews Jet the Hawk 1994 and Musical Weirdo asked thoughts on Hugo. Um, Hugo, he's just boring. I mean, besides the fact that like he's an experimental engine, that he's unique in his design, like character wise, he doesn't really have anything that interesting. His stories are pretty boring. Well, his first story is kind of a repeat of Harvey to the Rescue, and so like which I wasn't opposed to them kind of repeating that plot because I mean the sixth season was how many years ago, so I think like kind of having a similar plot take place in CGI all these years later wasn't a bad thing, so I thought it was good. But then his second plot with Hugo and the airship, I thought was like the purpose of it was totally defeated in the fact that now in Big World Big Adventures, in every opening, Thomas is like flying off of Gordon's Hill, and it was like there was a whole story 2 seasons prior where Hugo couldn't do that, and that was like gravity still existed back then, but now like it's not as big of a deal, obviously. So I think Hugo's stories obviously are just kind of there. I'm not quite sure why they were there. Maybe that was something that like Mattel wanted them to have a specific theme. Maybe it was something that the writers came up with that they thought that having the experimental engines theme for a DVD set would be really good. It sounded like it was like a cool idea, just really wasn't executed properly. I think Hugo could have been used more. I think especially like if Hugo had a set route where he's taking passengers from this location to this location, and so you see him along that way, or there's certain things that happen. I think that they could have used him for more interesting stories. Even if he does have a blander personality, he could have had something interesting happen to him on his route, or it would have been maybe a funny story if there was like a deserted truck on the line and like Hugo has to like smash his face into it and like push it to get it out of the way. I don't know. They could have done something funny with that. But yeah, I think that he has potential, but he seems to be one of those characters very similar to like Rosie and Stanley and Charlie, where it's just the writers are just gonna kind of leave them because they don't really know what to do with them and they don't want to do anything with them. So yeah. All right. Ready Productions, Gabriel Moriau. I'm sorry. Stephanie number 55 and Thomas Pandit fan asked thoughts on Journey Beyond Sodor. Um, well, it's kind of a tough one. Like when you're coming from like I remember specifically watching the trailer and whatnot. I wasn't appalled, I should say. Like I know some people were. Uh, I so coming from season 20, just having watched the Arsdale Railway episodes, and then going into um, like the trailer of Journey Beyond Sodor, it did feel very different, and it didn't feel like Thomas in the way that we had it, and it. I mean, we're coming from like one of the highest all-time highest points of the series, and then dropping to this, and it was like, oh, interesting. It just didn't seem well put together. The poster, like the cover, obviously just seemed so just thrown together really fast using stock photos and whatnot. And then I think having like the narrow gauge slate trucks being used as standard gauge rolling stock, and then the bouncing and the engine swaying and stuff, just I think it rubbed people really wrong. But so that when you're coming from that perspective going forward, like it seems like a downgrade. But now that like looking back at it, especially compared to like the transition that it led to Big World Big Adventures, I mean, Journey Beyond Sodor really is not that different to the seasons prior to it. I mean, yeah, the engines sway and move and whatnot, but like like story wise and like the look of everything and the feel of Sodor, like it doesn't actually feel um, that different compared to what comes later. And well, one side note that I have to say is I absolutely love the opening sequence to Journey Beyond Sodor. That island shot and the whole thing, like that is like the ultimate um, in Thomas Island of Sodor intro that they could have done, and I think that is probably like one of the best send offs that they could have done for considering it's the last special to have a narrator. So I think that like having the narrator open up, giving that whole little monologue and covering all those things and just showing the beauty and the awesomeness of Sodor. I think that was phenomenal. They did a great job with that. I think Journey Beyond Sodor could have been a little more interesting in its plot. Like I was thinking there was going to be something more devious, or I guess not dark, but I mean in some ways, because like you could tell that Frankie and Hurricane weren't, there was something off about them, and I was thinking that there was going to be like some like interesting plot twist at the end or something crazy happened. But then they ended up releasing the last song on YouTube like a week before the DVD was released. And it kind of spoiled everything, and it was like, oh, it just kind of ends. I mean, the past three Thomas movies have all had the same really lame ending, and the fact that it's just like, okay, we're over now, let's head back to Sodor, and they sing their song and they cross the Victorstown Bridge, and then everyone's reunited and la di da, it's everyone's happy now. Like it, I don't know, it just not. It seems like a lazy ending compared to like the endings that we got in King of the Railway, Tell of the Brave, The Adventure Begins, and Legend of the Lost Treasure. I think that those were much better written and just more entertaining. Like they actually felt like good wrap ups to the story, whereas the last three have just been really lazy, like just hurrying to try and wrap things up. So yeah, I think Journey Beyond Sodor isn't a terrible movie. Like I definitely don't think it's like, oh, this is the all-time worst Thomas movie ever. I think it definitely could have been better in a lot of ways. I think that it sadly was the beginning of the transition to the things that we don't like. But it's definitely, I mean, it's nowhere near as bad as what came the following year for the next special. I think that Journey Beyond Sodor looks pretty good in comparison to the Big World Big Adventures movie. But yeah, and I think there were some really interesting characters that were introduced. I really wish that they would have done more with them. One of the things I'm thinking back on, me and Enterprising Engine 93, we were having a discussion before Journey Beyond Sodor came out, and we were kind of discussing that potentially like maybe it's the experimental engines are being hunted down by Frankie and Hurricane, and that they're trying to scrap them because it's the steelworks and whatnot. And so like it would have made for a much more interesting plot, but maybe that wasn't it wasn't as kid friendly probably as what the producers were hoping for. But Thomas hasn't always shied away from some of the darker themes, and so it would have been nice for them to kind of cover that maybe, and at least made something that was more interesting. I feel like it just was a little too bland at times. Thomas being held hostage, I thought that was kind of an interesting, fun plot, and I really like how, and at least in this film, Thomas actually is homesick, and Thomas has logic in this film when it comes to being away from home, and I really liked that where Thomas, he's away from Sodor. He did this thing just out of his own cheekiness that he was going to take James's train for him. But then now that he was here, like he's starting to regret, and he actually like misses home. He misses Annie and Clarabelle and Percy. He gets that whole song all to himself, And I really like that song is my absolute favorite. I Want to Go Home from Journey Beyond Sodor is absolutely my favorite song of the movie, and I think that like kids could relate to that. You know, if especially as kids get older, you know, they have various things where maybe they won't be with their parents all the time. Like if they go on some sort of like a scout camp trip or I don't know, like a school activity or something where they're away from their parents. Like those are their initial thoughts. They get homesick, and they so I think that they could relate to Thomas in those moments. And I think that's one of the major flaws of Big World, Big Adventures is that Thomas doesn't have a second thought about Sodor. And then even at the end of the movie, when he gets back, he doesn't even really want to go across the Vickerstown Bridge. And so I think that it's hard. Like you can't really relate to Thomas because Thomas is acting so illogical that like it just doesn't make sense. Like Thomas is singing about like how he feels bad that he hurt Nia, and now he's traveling over the around the world to find her. And it's like, well, wait a second, you abandoned Annie and Clarabelle and Percy and all your other friends, but you're not giving a second thought about them. So yeah, I like Journey Beyond Sodor a heck of a lot more than Big World, Big Adventures, but it's still, you know, I wouldn't put it up there with Lost Treasure, The Adventure Begins, or some of these other movies. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my general thoughts on it. I would be very curious to see overall what the kind of what caused the creation of Journey Beyond Sodor, because it seems like that there's been a push. Not sure who it was from in the production team, if it was someone higher up in Mattel, or if it was someone within the team, if it was Brenner or Ian McHugh or someone that kind of decided that like, hey, let's expand Thomas Beyond Sodor and let's take this movie and actually be Journey Beyond Sodor, because I mean they started doing it with King of the Railway. They had the Vickerstown Bridge, so obviously engines could leave Sodor. Then in the Great Race, they actually did go beyond Sodor for the first time, and then in this movie, they actually like have a whole plot that takes place with Thomas going beyond. And so I wonder if this was all intentionally to build up to Thomas going around the world, and so like over time, Thomas was expanding his universe, and then eventually goes on this big trip and kind of the transition to that. Or I wonder, like, was this just Brenner had this idea and he wanted to pursue it, and like he had this idea of a steelworks hostage situation and the experimental engines, and so he wanted to just run with it. So I don't know. I'd be very curious to see like what kind of was the premise behind the creation of this movie, because it's been so long since we've had a movie that takes place on Sodor and is about something with Sodor. I mean, yeah, Legend of the Lost Treasure was the last time that it a special took place entirely on Sodor, and yeah, like I missed that. I mean, it's been 3-4 years now since then. So I think I really hope we get a special in the future where it takes place just on Sodor, and we get to see Sodor itself be expanded more, and makes continue to make Sodor as magical as we've come to know it as fans. All right, Thomas Mario Fan 11 asked thoughts on the Great Discovery. Um, so I haven't watched The Great Discovery in a really long time. Like I can't actually remember when was the last time I watched it. I know I've seen it all the way through before. I can't like remember all the plot details and things. It just didn't. I don't know. It never really appealed to me. Yeah, I don't know. There just wasn't anything. I mean, yeah, it was with the models, but like I said yesterday, like just because it's with the models doesn't necessarily mean that I love it. Like I mean, we've seen great CGI and terrible CGI. We've seen great model stuff and terrible model stuff. And so sadly I would put this more in the category of the not so good model stuff. I mean, I'm far more familiar with Calling All Engines versus The Great Discovery. Like I don't know if it really. I think if my memory serves me correct, The Great Discovery is a better movie than some of the ones that came later in CGI. Obviously, it wasn't as bad as like Misty Island Rescue and whatnot, but in comparison to like Day of the Diesels or Blue Mountain Mystery, I don't know how I would rank it amongst those. Probably should just go back and watch it. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, I probably should do that. So I'll put that on my to-do list amongst all my other big assignments and homework things. I'm doing this recording right now between two different finals that I have to take, so this is like my little break today. Okay, Jet the Hawk 1994, Ready Productions, AJ Domes, Thomas Pandit Fan, and Thomas Fan 7 asked, thoughts on the Great Race? What would you change? Um, I don't think the Great Race is as bad as everyone seems to think it is. I think it's perspective wise. You know, when you're coming from watching Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure, and then you come and watch the Great Race, and you know it's not as good a quality. And but I think like if you were coming from watching Journey Beyond Sodor or maybe Tale of the Brave or something else and then seeing it, like you wouldn't think it's bad. I thought that there was a lot of really clever things that were used, clever plots. I think Brenner did a great job writing it. I think that there was clearly it was established that they wanted to do something to kind of tie in with the Olympics and whatnot that was taking place in 2016. And I think Brenner did a great job. Like I love in the opening sequence how Thomas races Gordon, but it isn't something stupid like in Hero of the Rails where it's like you're going to have this tiny tank engine race this big tender engine, which doesn't logically make sense because obviously Spencer is a much faster engine. And so I like how instead of Thomas actually racing Gordon at full speed, it's Thomas is just trying to beat Gordon to the signal box. And I thought that that was such a clever, fun little plot, and it introduced racing to the story. And so I think there were some really good moments in the Great Race. I think that just kind of the overall plot was a little weak. I think the Unlucky Tugs review that he posted, I think had a lot of great points. You know, if the story had been more focused on Gordon, it would have been better. And I definitely agree because there is that kind of slow point on Sodor where Ashima's just chilling around on the island and Thomas is trying to figure out how to get to the Great Race. And so yeah, and I think the um, Diesel and his whole plot, I think that if that would have somehow tied in later and like, you know, had some reason to be a part of the story, I think that would have improved it. But overall, like I don't think it was a bad movie. I think it was better than Journey Beyond Sodor. And I think definitely better than Big World Big Adventures. But in regards to other ones, I'd say it's higher up in my list of specials. I don't know how I would rank it compared to like Tell of the Brave, but you know, it's got a consistent story. I thought that the whole streamlining thing was an interesting concept, and it was fun to see them explore that. Having the Flying Scotsman be in the story was very interesting. I wasn't a fan of his design, and then having Flying Scotsman, since he was introduced in the Great Race, you know, he became such a big part of the Thomas Creator Collective, and for me, as a kid, like the Flying Scotsman was such a mystery, especially with like his the fact that like you saw his two tenders in the model series and that was it, and like there was just something mysterious about him, and like reading in the Railway series, like who he was and how he was Gordon's brother and stuff. Like I thought it was really cool. Um, and it was just kind of a letdown maybe in some way seeing the interpretation where instead like I interpreted in the Railway series that Flying Scotsman was this nice kind like kind of the ideal older brother, especially to Gordon, like he was kind, and like you see their conversations they have in the Railway series, and so that's kind of like what I pictured the Flying Scotsman. And then to see that like in the TV series, like Flying Scotsman is even worse than Gordon, and you can see why Gordon's the way he is. Like it makes sense, and it was a cool, interesting new approach. It just has isn't what I would do, and so I hope to have Flying Scotsman in my own series in the future. But I don't think Flying Scotsman will have the personality of the CGI series that he has, and I don't like the design that he had in a lot of ways. I think it was just poorly done. But it was cool that they had him regardless. And then I really liked the songs that they had. The Great Race had some great songs in it. Will You Won't, like I mentioned yesterday, Will You Won't You and Streamlining are two of my favorites that they had. And then the bridge jump. I that's a yeah. I looked past it back initially when we um, watched it for the first time because it was such a small thing. But it's sad to see that that kind of stuff is what led to things like Big World, Big Adventures, where it was let's take these over the top, exciting moments that get kids interested, and let's make like Thomas be completely about those. And I think it's kind of I've mentioned this analogy before to different people that you know things like the bridge jump or these exciting over the top moments that are you know usually the things that are put on thumbnails and DVD covers and those types of things or in trailers those highlights those kind of action moments, they're kind of like the icing on top of like a cupcake or a piece of cake or something. The frosting's the best part, but you don't want to just eat straight frosting, and so there's got to be some substance behind it. Like, you wouldn't want to just watch a Star Wars movie that's 2 hours of lightsaber fighting and no plot at all. I mean, yeah, it might be interesting, but like, you don't go watching a Star Wars movie solely just to watch 2 hours of people fighting with lightsabers. And so there's got to be the plot behind it, the emotion, and those things that kind of build for those moments. And that's what makes the icing on the cake great. And so I think when you overuse those things, it loses value and it's just gross at that point. And I think that's the problem. Like, I really didn't mind the bridge jump, and especially if okay, include those crazy, wacky, like one-off moments somewhere in the special. That's fine. Create the toys that go around them, use it for thumbnails, use it for DVD covers and promotional material and whatnot to get kids excited. But if the overall heart of the content is still true to itself, then I don't have any issue with it. It's when they start altering all the content as a whole to match that, and it just shifts what Thomas should be. And that's, I think, one of the big issues that I have with Big World Big Adventures. So yeah. All right. Sponge Engine 423 asked thoughts on the new series, seasons 8 through 11. So I talked about this yesterday when I was asked about Emily, and so when I was a child at the time when sorry, one second. I was a child at the time when season 8 came out, and so like I remember I had my VHS collection of Thomas movies or Thomas episodes that I would watch and whatnot, and I remember getting Steamies versus Diesels or It's Great to Be an Engine, these first season 8 DVD or VHSs, and watching them along with the other ones and just noticing how different it was than classic Thomas that I knew. And it was at that point that I really lost interest in Thomas for the first time in my life. And it was only a couple years later that I actually, regained interest. And then I started like working on creating my own series and whatnot. But like, I did lose interest in Thomas as a child because of, season 8 and the transition, just because it wasn't Thomas that I knew. And it wasn't, I had no interest in watching it when it wasn't anything that I found appealing in any way. It just seemed way too dumbed down. Everything seemed dull and boring in comparison. I didn't like it. It just wasn't Thomas that I knew. So I mean, I watched season 8, a lot of the episodes of season 8, and then some of season 9. Season 10, I don't think I saw really anything of. And season 11, I think I've only watched just a couple episodes from season 11. So I actually don't know like in detail, but everything that I've seen, like I've tried watching the episodes, especially now that most of them are on YouTube. Like I've tried before to like, okay, like maybe I can get some story ideas from them for my own series. So I've tried to sit down and watch them, but they're just so slow and boring and just really hard to sit all the way through. I think the music and the narration are probably the two key things. Because looking at like the story plots aren't like terrible. They're not the worst. They're not as bad as like seasons 13 through 16. But I think because the narration is so dull, and on top of that, the music, it just it doesn't fit the classic series. It's way more toned down. It just didn't feel like Thomas to me. I think that was one of the key things that kind of drove me away from it. So I think if they would have, if the sets would have been, a variety of colors, if the lighting had been better, especially with the digital cameras and whatnot they were using at that point, if that had been improved, and then if the music had been more like the classic series, more engaging, and then if Michael Brandon would have been, a better narrator, hate to say that, I think I would have probably stayed around a lot longer and have kept more interest in it. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it. I need to go through it. It is on my agenda to eventually go through and watch all of those episodes, no matter how painful they may be at certain times. So that way I can say that I've at least seen every single Thomas episode, and that way I can use certain ideas, because there were good ideas and concepts that were used in stories. I definitely recognize that, and I'd like to be able to maybe capitalize on some of those by tying some of those ideas into my own series, and bringing them back, maybe showing how they could have been used if they had used those ideas more in the earlier seasons rather than during this era. So yeah. All right. LMS Arthur and Musical Weirdo asked, "What are your thoughts on extraordinary engines, and will you purchase Hugo?" So again, this is another question that was obviously asked back before, like, well, this was asked back, 2 years prior, before this had been released, and there were, like, I didn't have Hugo at the time. So clearly, as you can see from my remakes and my work in the TCC, that I did have Hugo. I actually have two Hugos. I have one that I use for normal, it's motorized normal use, and then I have another one that I took out the motor so that way I could pull it with a string, because Trackmaster 2 engines are terrible, and um, they don't freewheel, which I think is just absolutely stupid of the toy maker's part. But anyways, not going into that right now. Extraordinary Engines, I thought that was a really fun DVD. When I go back and watch those episodes, like, it really puts me in the mindset of that time and how awesome season 20 was. I know the Hugo episodes are kind of weak, but I really enjoyed the other episodes that were on the DVD, like the Missing Breakdown Train or Crane. I think that was a really fun episode. Love that Judy and Jerome got spotlight. I love that Daisy got spotlight as well. Skip and the Mermaid was such a fun episode. Like, I think that there's a great balance between old and new with Thomas, and I think that some of these episodes were really highlighted that, where they still felt like Thomas, and especially classic Thomas, but they had such fun, new, interesting things that it made the stories really fun and engaging and entertaining for children. I thought the animation during this time was also really good. Yeah, I just really I liked Extraordinary Engines. I mean, I created several remakes during the time that it came out and redid a lot of the episodes, at least certain clips from them and whatnot. And I'm really glad I did that. Like, I didn't just do it solely because, like, oh, that's the latest thing, and that way I can capitalize on the current trends of the TV series, but I did it because, like, I actually really enjoyed what was going on with the TV series, and I'm glad I remade a lot of season 20 episode, like, clips from those different episodes, because I mean, I put them close up there with seasons 1 through 5, and the quality of episodes that they were in comparison to the classic series. So yeah, overall I liked Extraordinary Engines. Hugo could have been better, but yeah, I mean, it's still good overall. Whenever I think of Extraordinary Engines, I have positive memories of season 20. So it takes me back to the second the second great era of Thomas, I guess you could say. All right, Stepney number 55 and Super James 526 asked, "What are your thoughts on one-off characters, and should they be brought back?" Um, I think so. I think that there's potential with them. I can understand why they focus more on creating new characters, because they want to create more toys and things. But I think it's, as a series, it's a real shame that they bring in a character and then never do anything with them again, and they just are kind of left there. Um, I think kids notice those things, and they're, because especially if they really liked a character like Billy, for example. If the kids were like, I love this orange engine, like, I want to see more of them, and then you never see any more of them, they are left to wonder, like, well, what's happened to Billy? Where is he? What is there more stories that I'm not aware of where Billy exists and whatnot? And so, like, I really wish they would have. I wish that there were no one-off characters. I think that's a sad um, a sad thing that's happened in the TV series. Like, I don't mind, like, in the classic series, like, there were one-off characters, but, like, usually they had a certain fate to them. Like, you had Smudger, who ended up as a generator, or Bulstrode, who ended up on the beach, and so they usually are, or Bulgy, who ended up as a hen house. Like, they end up in a specific place, and they kind of become stationary, so they don't really have any more plots. But usually they've been seen, like, in the background and stuff, and so I think that that's fine, because, like, that they still exist on Sodor. It's kind of hard for, like, characters like Billy, because now you just sit there and wonder, like, whatever happened to him. And so I think it'd be great if they would have expounded more on, like, him, Molly, Neville, Dennis, who else am I thinking of? Bertram, especially. There are a lot of season 5 characters, and that's actually the main reason why I've included season 5 characters as a part of my series, is because I felt like a lot of those characters were underutilized, like specifically Bertram, and so I wanted to, I felt like my series could utilize their potential and actually create for some fun, interesting plots that still fit within the the Thomas universe that I had grown to recognize as a child what I had seen Sodor as, and so I think that's the main reason why I included them, was because I felt like I could really create some fun, interesting plots with those characters that still felt like classic Thomas. All right, Duck D Duck GWR and H2 Heighten San. I'm sorry if I butchered these names. Some of them are a little hard. What are your thoughts on season 17 to present? So again, this was one that was asked back when season 20 was being released. So season 17 to present was, the Brenner era as we knew it at the time. Obviously, things have changed with season 21 and then Big World, Big Adventures. So I'm going to answer this question specifically as season 17 through 20/21. And honestly, I absolutely loved it. Like, I mean, the second great era of Thomas, I would call it. Like, I mean, the stories were phenomenal. Brenner is one of the few people in this world I think who truly understood Thomas and what it should be. And I think he understood that. I mean, he's understood that for a really long time, and the fact that he wrote these magazine stories back in the early days of the show that were eventually adapted because they were so good into TV series episodes. So I think he has been one that truly understood Thomas, and so I think he did a phenomenal job. So many great stories. I really want to go back and just rewatch all of season 17 through 20. I need to get a hold of all of the episodes. I mean, they used to all be on YouTube, but the copyright stuff's been taking them down one by one, and so there isn't quite the complete collection that there used to be. I know they're available on Amazon, so I think that at some point I'll probably just spend $100 and get all high quality season 17 through 20, so that way I have all those episodes to watch in the future. But yeah, I thought that they were great use of characters, great use of plots and Sodor in general. So I thought there were a lot of great things. Some improvements I wish they would have done. I wish they would have fixed the animation sooner than season 19. I mean, season 17 and 18 have great stories, but they're not airing on Nick Jr. right now just because they don't visually look similar to the current stuff, and you can tell that there's a difference in quality. And so I think that's kind of a shame, because I think there's some really great stories in those two seasons. And then I think having the red trucks in Arc's animation, I talked about this earlier, but that's one of the things that I really just don't like about this era. I don't like that each type of rolling stock has a specific color, and they kind of just stuck with that. I liked how they had varieties of trains and things. Engines were actually pulling, things of rolling stock, but they were all very similar. It was 5 red trucks, and they all had crates in them. Very simple. They weren't like the complex goods trains that we saw in the classic series, and even in the Nitrogen era in seasons 13 through 16, we got to see some cool looking goods trains in some of those opening sequences. And so I really wish that they would have had more of those, utilizing the troublesome trucks more, especially having different kinds of troublesome trucks. They did that later, obviously with Journey Beyond Sodor, but it would have been nice, especially getting different shapes of the faces, so they weren't all the same square face that was on every single troublesome truck. So if they would have done that, I think that would have been a nice improvement. I think also, what was something else? Oh, I really wish that they would have done more narrow gauge episodes. The fact that we only got 2 in season 18 is just really a bummer, because I feel like this was a team, a writing team that really understood the characters and could really make some awesome stories. And so I wish that they would have written more stories besides just Duncan and the Grumpy Passenger and Duncan the Humbug, because I mean, we got so many narrow gauge episodes in the hit era, the new series era, and I mean, they're pretty poor quality. But then when we had great writers and great potential, we didn't get any narrow gauge stories really, and so that's a huge shame. I would have loved to see Peter Sam and Sir Handel get it would have been nice for a narrow gauge engine that wasn't Duncan or Millie or Luke to take the lead on a story, and not have it at the Blue Mountain Quarry, because that was kind of the conditions of all the narrow gauge stories besides the 2 with Duncan, is that they were basically all at the Blue Mountain Quarry or at the Earl's estate. And so I wish we could have gotten more of that, but it didn't quite happen. But we got a lot of great things instead, and so I think that overall like, I mean, there's way more positives to say about this era than negatives. I mean, the negatives are really just nitpicks at this point, because overall the series was phenomenal. The music was great. The animation got great. It wasn't that great at the beginning, but I think it turned out better than any Nitrogen era stuff, or better than what we see currently with Big World Big Adventures. I think that season 1920 Lost Treasure style was just phenomenal, beautiful work. Some of the camera angles and things, the directing style and things were just really awesome. Overall, I think that it was just a great era of the TV show. They brought a lot of great things. They helped expand Sodor. I just can't say enough positive things about it. It's really a shame that Andrew Brenner has left the series. It's not really that surprising. You can tell his involvement has decreased over the past couple years. From what I understand, he's been writing for other TV series, and so like it doesn't surprise me now. Like, I can't obviously confirm this or anything, but he worked for. I mean, he's been a part of Thomas for so long. He knows what Thomas is and what it should be, and so I think for things to change with Thomas, like I can see why he would rather focus his efforts on other shows and series, especially ones where he maybe has more control over and can do more things with, than continuing to just go along with Thomas. And so I can see why he made the transition. It's just a shame, because he was such a great head writer and really loved his work and the team that he had. Um, Helen Farrell was another great writer. Holy cow, she wrote some really phenomenal episodes. And so it's just a shame that they're gone now. However, we do have Michael White, who I thought wrote some great stories in season 22. So I think that there's still the potential for in Big World Big Adventures in these new seasons for there to be just a couple episodes every season that I think are high enough quality that I would put in the category of season 17 through 21. And I think the two stories that Michael White wrote were definitely ones that I would put there. So I hope we see more stories like those in the future and whatnot. So we'll just have to see. But it's not entirely over. There's still little bits of good moments in the upcoming series, but it's definitely not the great quality that we had. But I'm just overall I'm grateful that we had this era um, of these stories. Like one story in particular that comes to mind. So I mentioned yesterday, like I watched every single season 13 through 16 episode that came out on the day that it came out, which is funny because they're the absolute worst Thomas episodes, but like I watched every single one. I think it's because I like the animation too, and it was fun. The opening sequences were always really fun with some of the different things that they did. So I watched all of those, and I remember hearing the news that Andrew Brenner was going to take over and that there was going to be this change in style and whatnot. And I was so excited for it. And then when we found out that Railway Mischief was going to be the DVD that had season 17 episodes and whatnot, it was being released, I think it was like in March or April of 2013 during that time. Um, I was so excited that I woke up at, I think it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, um, drove to my local Walmart, went to the very back and asked some of the employees that I'm looking for this specific DVD. This is the name. This is the item number and whatnot. And I had them go into the back and find it. Like I don't even think they had unboxed like the new shipment yet. And so I had them go get me that DVD. I went home and it was like 4 in the morning, and I'm just chilling there at home watching this DVD. And oh my gosh, it was so worth it. Watching those episodes for the first time. Gordon Runs Dry. Kevin, is it Cranky's new friend? Kevin's new friend. And then like Scruff's Makeover, Steamy Stafford, and whatnot. Like watching those episodes was just like amazing. That we had stories that were great quality. Again, it wasn't the same repetition throughout the stories, and so I absolutely loved it. Like that's one of the greatest memories I have in high school. One of my greatest Thomas memories overall is experiencing that. And then it was fun a year later when the season 18 episodes came out and that first DVD. Also buying those. Like I always would stay up for when the new season, those episodes would come out, and so that was just some great memories of watching those things as they came out. And I'm glad that I got to spend my senior year of high school watching great Thomas episodes again, and then over the next few years, while I've been at college, being able to see those as well. I think it's been great, and it was nice having Thomas be in a quality state, or at least the show. I mean, the merchandise started to decline after that point. Um, the show being in a positive state in comparison to the classic series, and having it kind of in some ways rival those things, and really expand in new ways. So overall, absolutely love seasons 17 through 20. Um, okay, this is going to be our last question for today, because I've got some things I got to go take care of. I got a final I have to take, and I have to drop off a final project. So this is going to be the final question I'll go through, and hopefully tomorrow I'll do another one of these live streams. Just keep doing as many as I can, spacing them out probably one per day and whatnot. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. It looks like we've had people. I haven't really checked the chat. Interesting to see what some people are saying right now. But anyway, so this last question. So Sodor, an American Railroad, and Paul the Railway fan asked, what are your thoughts on the CGI series? So the CGI series as a whole, from seasons 13 now to seasons 22, I mean, it's been almost 10 seasons. And I think, it's hard to say like, oh yeah, the CGI series is great, because the CGI series has so many highs and lows. I think that we've seen great CGI episodes. We've also seen terrible CGI episodes. So to say overall like that it's great or bad, I don't think that I could. I think that there's other more important factors that should be asked or looked at first, rather than just if it's CGI or models. But I think, like I said in the last question, basically what we got in season 17 through 20 was absolutely phenomenal. Some of the greatest moments of the Thomas series overall, I think, took place in those eras. In some ways, went above and beyond just the classic series that we knew. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. Like, there's so many memories in my own personal life that I tie into key moments of that era of the CGI series. Like, I remember my first night at college, I actually watched Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure for the first time, and so like I kind of I have nostalgic memories, not only because it was an awesome Thomas special, but also because it takes me back to that time, and it was just a really fun time in my life. And so yeah, like I really just love that era. Not really a fan of where the series is going right now. Not a fan of what it was back before Brenner took over in the writing. So we've seen good and bad. So it's kind of hard to say overall. So yeah. Anyways, I appreciate you guys for watching. Hopefully we'll do another one of these again soon. Hopefully tomorrow I'll have to see. Things are just kind of busy and things are up in the air. But I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and hopefully I'll be able to do more of these soon and see you guys later. If you guys have more questions that you'd like me to answer in the future, I think one of the things I may try and do is, if you tweet at me or comment on these videos after the live stream and have specific questions, I think one of the last things I'll try and do for the Q&A is actually compile all the most recent questions that were asked during the live stream, and maybe do like one extra video where I cover all those questions that weren't asked during the initial when the questions were open 2 years ago and whatnot. So if you guys have specific questions, make sure to leave them as a comment, not in the live chat, but as an actual comment, or tweet directly to me. So anyways, I will talk to you guys later, and thanks for watching.